Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, where we take up the articles from the Hindu and discuss them as per the demands of civil services examination. The topics of the discussion are listed on your screen. Now moving on to the first article of the day that has appeared on page 1 of the Hindu, basically talks about the demand and the issues regarding the Gorkhaland. Now the issues regarding the demand for a separate statehood for the Gorkhaland have been in the question from the past, and the issue has again been raised by the people of the Gorkhaland territorial administration who believe that the demands and the aspirations of the people under the Gorkhaland region have not fulfilled. Now if we look at this article, it falls under the federal scheme of architecture, and the GS2 syllabus talks about the Indian federal structure and the challenges that are pertaining to it. Now UPSC in the previous year have also asked questions related to the demands of smaller states, and such a question was seen in the year 2013. So this area becomes important from the perspective of mains examination, wherein the demand of the smaller states, the issues pertaining to it, can be asked by UPSC in the coming examination also. During this understand, we will try to understand who basically are the Gorkhas, the historic claim and their demand for the separate Gorkhaland, why there is a demand now, why Gorkhaland is important, what has been the response of Indian government towards the demands of the Gorkhaland, and lastly we will also discuss the way forward for the same. Now the first thing to understand here is who are the Gorkhas. Basically, Indian Gorkhas are indigenous people who are living in the Himalayan belt and in the northeastern states of the country. The Gorkha today inhabit the areas of Jammu and Kashmir, Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Sikkim, Darjeeling, Assam, and other states in the northeastern region. Now, this brings us to the question that how there has been a demand of Gorkhaland in the past. If we look at the map, we can see that Gorkhaland consists of Nepali-speaking people of Darjeeling, Kalimpong, Kurseng, and other hilly region of the country. Now, the people of these regions believe that they have hardly any connection with the Bengali-speaking community of the region, and they present a historical claim for the same. Gorkhaland dates back to the year of 1780. In 1780, Gorkhas captured the Sikkim, and they also captured the areas surrounding the Sikkim, which include the modern-day Darjeeling, Siliguri, Simla, Nainital, etc. That is, the entire area ranging from Teesta to Sutlej was under the control of Gorkhas. And Gorkhas was successful in ruling for a time period of 35 years in these regions. But however, in 1816, with the signing of Treaty of Sagoli, after the Gorkhas lost in the Anglo-Nepal War, Gorkhas surrendered these territories to the British Empire. In the modern day, again, the demand rose in 1907. The first demand for the Gorkhaland was then submitted to the Memento reforms, and the demands were also made in the subsequent years to the British government then, and with the very independence to the independent government of India for the formation of the Gorkha state. And the area has witnessed two mass movements in 1980s and later in 2007 also. So now that we have seen that Gorkhas were historically controlling the region between the Teesta and the Sutlej, and later lost to the British Empire during the Anglo-Nepal War with the signing of Treaty of Sagoli, we will try to understand why there has been a demand for the Gorkhaland from these people. Now, like any other demand for a separate statehood, the first basis of demand for separate Gorkhaland is the differences in the language and the culture. Gorkhas consider themselves to be different ethnically from the Bengali-speaking plain people. Now, we have also seen that the Gorkhas underwent two mass movements in 1980s and later in 2007. But the aspiration of the Indian Gorkha community was never satisfied. Though the Darjeeling Hill Council was created in the year 1988, and later the Gorkha Territorial Administration was also created in the year of 2012, both the organizations have not been able to fulfill or have failed to fulfill the aspirations that they were set up for. The third major reason behind the demand for Gorkhaland is the economic deprivation that the people of this area is facing, which includes low level of employment and also presence of what they consider as outsiders in the famous tea industries, which they believe they have the first ownership to and are now reduced to the level of mere workers, with people of Gorkhaland lamenting that the outsiders take the major chunk of the profit through these tea industries, and the Gorkhaland people are thus reduced to mere workers, and also the region faces severe unemployment. The last reason that can be highlighted behind the demand of Gorkhaland is the maltreatment that is done by the Bengalis and the lack of voice of Gorkhaland people in Kolkata or the state politics. Further, the Gorkhaland people believe that the state follows policy which is detrimental to their cultural freedom, wherein they cite the example of imposition of Bengali language by the state government on them, and they identify this as somewhat cultural imperialism by the state government and thus maltreatment at the hands of majority Bengalis. So this brings us to the next logical question, that why this movement matters or why Gorkhaland movement is important. Now the Gorkhaland movement is important due to the following facts. The first fact here is that it can have a dent on the India-Nepal relation. Now Gorkhaland movement is one of the oldest movement, as we have already seen, and the relationship of India with Nepal will also be hampered with this movement. We have seen that India and Nepal share the roti-beti ties. India have been supporter for the cause behind the Madhesi people and their position in the Nepali politics previously. Similarly, how India treats the problem of Nepali people in the hill region of the Darjeeling will have an impact on how Nepal treats the issue of Indian origin people in Nepal. That is, how India treats Nepali origin people in the hill districts of India, that is the Gorkhaland people, will have an impact on how Nepal treats the Madhesi people in the Terai belt of Nepal. The second important factor behind Gorkhaland is the strategic location that it occupies. Now, Gorkhaland is located in the strategic position near the Chicken's Neck that connects the northeastern states with the rest of the India, and thus it is very important for the strategic and the territorial integrity of India that this region or the Gorkhaland region remains stable. The last cause here that can be highlighted wherein the demand of Gorkhaland is important to the cause of India is that Darjeeling is a tea and tourist hotspot for India. But we have also seen that there are high level of poverty and very low level of employment there. Thus this area can be boosted and has a potential to become the economic powerhouse or the economic engine of the East. But this tourist destination can be further explored only if this area remains stable, and thus the economic prosperity can come to this region, or Darjeeling can become as the power engine of the northeastern region with regard with the tourist destination only if this area remains stable. Now that we have seen why there is demand for Gorkhaland and why Gorkhaland movement is important for India, we will try to understand what have been the traditional Indian response to the problem of Gorkhaland. We have seen that the two mass movement for the Gorkhaland happened in 1980s and later in 2007. Following the mass agitation in 1980s, Darjeeling Gorkha Hill Council was established, wherein a tripartite agreement was reached between Government of India, Government of West Bengal and that of Gorkha National Liberation Front in 1988, and under this Darjeeling Gorkha Hill Council was established. However, all the problems were not solved. The council was given limited executive powers and no legislative powers. Thus, the aspirations of the people of the region could not be addressed. Further, another cause of discontent was regarding the Duars region, as the Duars, which are called as gateways to Himalayas and are prominent for tea cultivation were not included in the council, and this has remained a major concern or a major reason for discontent even today. In 2012, Gorkhaland Territorial Administration was set up. The Gorkhaland Territorial Administration replaced this Darjeeling Gorkha Hill Council. This body was now semi-autonomous and it was given administrative, executive as well as financial powers. But again the problem arises. The problem arises because like the Darjeeling Gorkha Hill Council, the Gorkhaland Territorial Administration was devoid of any legislative powers which have been the demand of the people of Gorkhaland. Thus, the people of the region had no control over the laws to govern themselves by. And again, the Raus region, which were important for the tea cultivation, have been left out, and even a team was sent to identify Gorkha majority areas in Raus, which perpetuated the mistrust between the government and the people of the Gorkhaland. So this brings us to the last part of our discussion, that what can be done. The possible solutions can range as the first solution can be division of West Bengal into two states. The second solution can be giving or diluting more powers to the Gorkhaland Territorial Administration and creating a legislative process for the same by organizing transparent and open election. Or the parliament can amend the constitution of India and insert autonomous district within the West Bengal as it has already done for Assam. To further understand the demand for smaller state, what are the reasons behind demand of smaller state, what are the possible pros and the cons by demand of smaller states, you can also see the DNS dated 13th Feb, wherein the issue has been discussed on length by Shashank. With this, we have understood what is the problem of Gorkhaland. Moving on to the next article of the day that has appeared on page 12 of the Hindu, basically talks about the New START Treaty. President Vladimir Putin. Moving on to the next article of the day that has appeared on page 12 of the Hindu. The New START Treaty was the last remaining nuclear arms control pact of Russia with the United States of America, and this action of Russia coming out of the New START Treaty has upped the tension as Russia has already been engaged in a war with the Ukraine. However, later the Russian Foreign Ministry has clarified that it would respect the caps on the nuclear weapons under the Nuclear Arms Control Treaty and would continue to exchange the information about the test launches of the ballistic missiles. Now this article is important from the prelims perspective of UPSC examination, as UPSC can ask about the treaties that are in news in the prelims examination. During our discussion, we'll understand what is the New START Treaty, when it was signed, and the background for it. And also apart from that, we'll also discuss the Arms Trade Treaty that has been in the news for some point of time and which can also be asked in the prelims examination. Now if you see at this figure here, the figure highlights the arms control treaties that have been signed over the years and has been given in the 12th class NCRT. And this highlights the importance of NCRTs during our preparation. Now the figure shows the Limited Test Ban Treaty as it was signed in 1963. It also talks about important treaties of NPT, that is the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, SALT 1, that is the Strategic Arm Limitation Talks, SALT 2, and Strategic Arm Reduction Treaty that was for the first time signed in 1991, and START 2 that was signed in 1993. And then in 2010 when the New START Treaty was signed. We'll try to understand what New START Treaty was. Now the START Treaty here stands for the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty that was signed between the then United States and USSR. And New START Treaty is an addition to it, which was signed in the year 2010, that is 2010. The New START Treaty was officially known as the treaty between United States of America and the Russian Federation on the measures for further reduction and the limitation of strategic offensive arms. Now, as under the START treaties, there was a capping on the number of nuclear warheads and the intercontinental ballistic missiles or the ICBMs that each country, that is the United States of America and the Russia, could deploy. The START Treaty was coming to an end in 2009 and hence the new START Treaty was launched in 2010 for a period of 10 years. The new START Treaty was expanded for a period of 6 years later and was expanded till 2026. So we have seen that Russian Foreign Ministry has clarified that the capping on the nuclear warheads and the ICBMs or the further testing of the intercontinental ballistic missiles will be notified, and the primary motive behind signing of this treaty was to ensure a cap on the nuclear warheads. Further, there was a detailed provision regarding the compliance. The detailed procedures for the implementation and the verification of central limit was also a part of the treaty terms, and it provided for on-site inspections every year for the United States of America and the Russian teams, wherein the inspection was focused on the two sides. And there have been reports and were submitted in the US Congress that Russia was not complying with the new START treaty. That was the only remaining nuclear arms control treaty between the United States of America and that of Russia, and thus the stability was being jeopardized. Now that we have seen the genesis of new START treaty from the START treaty of 1993, we'll try to understand the arms trade treaty that has been in news for quite some time from the prelims perspective only. Now, arms trade treaty is also a multilateral treaty that seeks common standards and regulates the international trade of conventional weapons and seeks to reduce the illicit arms trades. Now, such treaties are important. UPSC can always ask about groupings like Wassenaar Arrangement, Nuclear Suppliers Group, Australia Group, MTCR regime of which India is a part or not. And thus the arms trade treaty becomes important for us, which we have discussed is a multilateral treaty to regulate international trade of conventional weapons and to also regulate the illicit arms trade. Thus, the arms trade treaty aims to reduce the human suffering that can be caused by the illegal arms trade and improve the regional security and the stability also. Now, there are various obligations under the arms trade treaty. Now, to be in compliance with the arms trade treaty, the state parties must establish and maintain an effective national control system for the export, import, transit and transshipment of conventional arms that are covered under the provisions of arms trade treaty. Further, the parts and the components that can be used for assembling the conventional arms and weapons under the arms trade treaty are also to be regulated and are covered under the treaty. The second major obligation is to establish and maintain a national control list and making it available to the other state parties. And apart from that, designation of national authorities who will be responsible for the maintenance of such system is to be done. Now, a thing to notice here is that arms trade treaty does not place any restrictions on the types or quantities of arms that may be possessed by the state, and it also does not impact the state's domestic gun control law or firearm ownership policy. So, the quantity and the type of arms that has been possessed by the state itself is not regulated under the arms trade treaty, rather than just the trade of conventional arms between the two countries is regulated under the arms trade treaty, and not the conventional weapons or other types of weapons of own use are regulated. It brings us to the last question, whether India is a part of arms trade treaty or not. Though India was one of the moving force behind the arms trade treaty, India has not signed the treaty on the ground that it is weak on the issues of terrorism and the concern of India regarding the non-state actors which do not find any mention under the treaty. With this, we have seen what basically arms trade treaty is. We have also discussed what the New START treaty was, how it evolved. And Now moving on to the next article of the day that has again appeared on page 1 of the Hindu, basically talks about the linking of Indian and the Singapore payment services. Now the article talks about that the India's real time retail payment system, that is the UPI or the Unified Payment Interface, which is actively used for digital payments through apps like that of Paytm, Google Pay or Bharat Pay, is now linked with the Singapore equivalent system known as Paynow. Now the article also mentioned that with the linking, people in both the countries can now send their money in real time via a QR code or simply by entering the mobile number linked to their bank accounts. Thus, it will facilitate a more efficient, more faster, transparent, cross-border transaction which are related to even trade, travel or remittance. Now this topic is important under the GSE or the economic section of UPSC examination, and in 2018 only UPSC asked a question in the prelims examination about the BHIM app. During this article we will try to understand why such a measure was needed and about the UPI. Now it was needed because the Indian Singaporeans constitute 9% of country's citizens and makes them the third largest ancestry and ethnic group in the Singapore. Further, a measure was needed also because the customers of the participating bank can now undertake cross-border remittances using mobile bank app through the QR code or directly by entering the mobile number of the recipient that is linked with the bank account. The transaction can happen. And this is also important as Singapore is one of the top 4 inward remittances market for India and occupies a space close to 6% of total remittances that have been made to India, amount close to $5 billion of remittances every year. Thus, the digital linkage will lead to real-time fund transfer, which will allow economic growth and also give a boost to the cost-effective transactions across the geographical boundaries and help the Indian diaspora that is working or studying in the Singapore. Further, this will also reduce the dependability on other system or modes of transfer, as the UPI-Paynow linkage will enable users to make fast digital payments to each other, which will be low in cost also. This brings us to the next question, that what basically is UPI? So Unified Payment Interface is nothing but a real-time payment system that has been developed by the National Payment Corporation of India or the NPCI. And UPI is a mobile-based fast payment system which facilitates customers to make round-the-clock payments instantly using a virtual payment address created by the customers. By creating the virtual payment address, it reduces or it eliminates the risk of sharing bank account detail by the remitter and also supports person-to-person or peer-to-peer and peer-to-merchant transaction. Now the Paynow system with which the UPI is now linked works on the similar line and has been developed by the Association of Banks in Singapore. It also enables peer-to-peer fund transfer by just using their mobile number and by creation of virtual payment address, wherein the bank account details of the remitter is not revealed, thus also improving the confidentiality and security. The linkage of the UPI and Paynow will further go a long way in development of the infrastructure for the cross-border payment system and closely aligns with the financial inclusion goals as propounded under the G20 agenda, which talks about making digital payment cheaper and more transparent and building it on a cross-border level. With this, we have seen what basically linkage was, what is UPI, and why there was a need to ensure such a system. Moving on to the next article of the day that has featured on page 9 of the Hindu, basically talks about the ICET, that is the Initiative on Critical and Emerging Technologies that US and India had signed earlier this month. Now the promise behind signing of ICET is to transform the relationship between India and that of United States of America. Now if we look at this article is important from the GS2 perspective of UPSC mains examination and falls within the domain of bilateral relationship between India and United States of America. And UPSC in the mains examination have asked question between the two. Now under the ICET agreement that was signed between India and United States of America, both countries have identified 6 areas where the two countries will partner, which includes innovation, defense innovation, technology cooperation, supply chain management, the telecom generation for the next stage, and cooperation over the space sector. Now the article further mentions about the ambitious goal that India aims to achieve through this partnership. The article also says that it is one of the ambitions wherein the belief is that the United States of America will help India to develop advanced jet engines and a possible licensed manufacture of engine for the light combat aircraft Tejas of India. Through this article, we will try to analyze the aspect of defense trade between India and United States of America. Now the defense cooperation between India and United States of America has now emerged as a major pillar for the India and United States strategic partnership today. We will try to analyze the traceback and the depth of the relationship between India and United States in respect of defense trade. What are the various issues that the two sides today faces regarding the defense trade? And at the last, we will also discuss the possible way forward such that the defense trade can be maximized between the two countries. Now, defense has emerged as an important pillar of the natural partnership between India and United States of America, and this happened post 2005. In 2005, India and United States of America signed new framework for the India-US defense relationship. This resulted in the intensification of the defense trade between the two countries and expansion to other areas where two countries concluded joint exercises, went on to go for defense procurement, and also to kickstart co-production by the two countries. The Defense Framework Agreement that was signed in 2005 was again updated and renewed in 2015, that is after 10 years of completion, and the two countries decided to explore new areas of cooperation, expand the nature of exercises wherein India participated for the first time under the RIMPAC exercises. A defense policy group was also formulated between the two countries. It also led to the establishment of joint technical group and ministry cooperation group between the two countries, thereby expanding and strengthening the defense cooperation between the two countries. And this is also visible if we analyze the value of defense trade between India and that of United States of America, which has steadily increased from the $3.25 billion from 2005 to the current standing of close to $22 billion today. Not only the defense cooperation has increased in the matter of buying and selling of weapons, India has also partnered with the United States of America by signing foundational agreements in the form of LIMUA, BECA, technical agreements, etc. with the United States of America in the years. In 2016, United States of America named India as a major defense partner for itself. In 2018, granted the STA, that is the Strategic Trade Authorization status to India, despite India not being a member of the NSG group. And the two countries, that is India and United States of America, established the DTTI, that is the Defense Technology and Trade Initiative, which was aimed at simplifying technology transfer policies and also to explore the possibilities of co-development and co-production further. So that we have seen that the defense trade has increased from value of $3.25 billion in 2005 to a current level of $22 billion, we need to identify what are still the challenges or the issues that plague the relationship between the two countries in matter of defense trade. The first issue that is highlighted in matter of defense trade is the issue of cost escalation. Now, it is believed from the Indian side that the original equipment manufacturer, that is the OEM, will be able to hold the bidding cost for the supply of goods. For example, a bidding cost is made for Chinook helicopters at the rate of, for say, 1000 crores for 2 helicopters, and this was made in 2015. Now, the process of bidding and to final process of acquisition may take several years. For example, it started in 2015 and the final acquisition happened in 2019. During this time, there may be cost escalation due to multiple factors, which includes increase in the price of raw material, inputs, and the fluctuating value of Indian rupee may have escalated the cost of procurement for Indian side. And this is a bone of contention between the two countries, as the American original equipment are not able to retain their cost. The second issue that the two countries face is the relaxed FDI limits. Now the FDI limit under the automatic route have been raised to 74%, and there has been a gradual liberalization to the 74% level. Yet many acquisitions under the strategic partnership, for example Make 1 or Make 2 initiative under the indigenously designed, developed and manufactured categories do not permit the Indian vendor to go beyond a level of 49%. So though there is an increase to 74%, but due to the conditionalities under the IDDM, the Indian vendors are not able to procure or make acquisition in FDI beyond 49% still. The third area that plagues the defense relationship between the two countries is the issue of delays. Now, the issues of delays ranges from defense specific exemptions, and the US industry believes that the uncertainties over the acquisition process make it difficult for them to invest in Indian research and development and manufacturing infrastructure due to the unusual delays in tax exemption, industrial licenses, etc. at the hands of Indian bureaucracy. Another area of problem between India and US defense race is the defense acquisition procedure of 2020. Now this defense acquisition procedure of 2020 has brought in certain changes in defense contracting framework, such as the clauses related to termination, taxes, duties, and this causes increase in the cost of compliance for the companies that are investing, and which in turn increases the cost of doing business. And thus American companies find it difficult under the defense acquisition procedure of 2020 to invest and do business with the Indian company. The last area of problem between India and US in defense relationship can be identified with the offset policy. First, we need to understand what basically is offset mechanism or what is defense offset. Now we know that defense deals are multi-billion-dollar deals, and thus any government who is entering into such multi-billion-dollar deals wants a part of their money to benefit the domestic industry. And same is the case for India, wherein the defense offset policies provides for an obligation on the strategic key partner or the player from which the defense deal has been procured to boost the domestic defense industry of the country and allow the domestic defense industry to gain from the technology transfer. Though the stated objectives are noble, however, it is seen that the product of civil aviation, homeland security are not discharging their offsets, which can serve as a critical technology transfer for the Indian domestic companies. Further, approval of the offsets and the banking claims that are required for the offset technology transfer complicates the process. Thus, these are the issues related to the cost escalation, FDI limits though relaxed but not homogenized, the delays at the hands of Indian bureaucracies, inception of termination taxes and duties under the defense acquisition process, and the increased cost of doing business along with compliance, and the issues in the offset policies where critical areas of technology transfer like that of civil aviation and the homeland security are not able to provide for the technology transfer, plagues the defense partnership between India and United States of America. Now that we have seen the problem, let us also understand a few way forward. There is a need to understand that there is an issue of quality with the domestic equipment Indian defense manufacture. The US equipments have proven reliability and quality, but same is not the case with the domestic equipment. Therefore, a potential area of bilateral cooperation between the India and United States of America can be over quality control and quality assurance from the Indian defense companies. The second area that can solve the problem between the two countries related to defense trade is the relaxation of stringent requirement regarding the indigenous components under IDDM and the Make 2 categories, which we have already discussed. The third areas can be the DTTI, and the focus should expand from just equipments to include cooperation on new areas like that of titanium and rare earth metal, which are critical elements of the modern defense equipment. And lastly, there is a need for the homogenization in the FDI policy, wherein acquisition categories should have a homogenized 74% investment under the automatic route and not to be restricted by clauses under the IDDM or the Make 1 or Make 2 categories that we have already discussed. With these issues resolved, the defense trade can further be boosted between the two countries, as we have already seen that defense has emerged as a critical element of India-US partnership, and the two countries today share common strategic and economic interest. Both are based on democratic ideology and today are challenged with a much more aggressive and common challenge of China. Thus, the defense cooperation between the two countries needs to be further strengthened and the issues need to be ironed out. With this, we have discussed about the partnership between the India and US in the defense field, how it has evolved to the current levels, the issues that the partnership in the defense respect currently faces, and the way forward possible outcome for the same such that the partnership can be further strengthened.